With me in the studio today is Dr. Michael Andron. Dr. Andron is a Mohel here in the South Florida area, and we've asked him in today to speak not only about his experience as a Mohel, one who does ritual circumcisions, but the current issues regarding circumcision in American society. Dr. Andron, could you just let our audience know how long you've been practicing?
I've been a Mohel for 28 years. 28 and a half, I guess now, midsummer. And I began in North Carolina, where I was the only Mohel in the state and covered 6 states at the time. And when we moved down here 25 years ago, I've continued practicing down in the South Florida area.
So how many circumcisions do you think you've done in your career?
I haven't done the last final check, but I know we're over 12,000 at this point.
So you're quite experienced.
Well, compared to my teachers, not nearly as many as they. In the old days, when the mothers stayed in the hospitals for 8 days, 12 days, usually 2 weeks, there were rooms in the hospitals where brisses were done. And so you could do 5, 10 brisses in a single hospital and then go to the next one in the course of a day. And so you'd be able to do way more babies when you're in an area as spread out as South Florida. There were days where I think probably the worst ever was a Kendall, Naples, Palm Beach day. Where you spend
for
most
our
of
audience, that's covering
that's
a
very
couple
far.
of hundred miles.
Yes, yeah,
in
that's
the Florida
very far.
area. Yes.
And so without a helicopter, pretty much you just have to drive it.
All right. Those who are watching the news and, of course, Jewish community news have heard tremendous uproar this year. The San Francisco law trying to ban circumcision, Santa Monica, and the rumblings of No Circ, the anti-circumcision organization. As a Mohel and as an observant Jew, how do you react to those efforts?
Well, fortunately, both of them have been thrown out, and neither one will be voted on. Neither Santa Monica nor San Francisco at this point. But there have always been those who didn't want to circumcise for one reason or another. Most of it is based on fallacious reasoning.
Such as?
Such as that they will compare it to, say, female genital mutilation and use a language that is very provocative and try and get people's sympathy in that way. The truth is, circumcision, even though the pediatricians, the American Pediatric Association has vacillated, about every 5 years they have to change their, their response to, is it necessary, is it warranted, is it covered by insurance? In truth, there is no single disease at all where the incidence of the disease goes up if you're circumcised. On the other hand, every single disease related to the area goes down. There was a study that had been, it went on for about 5 years in Africa about whether it prevented AIDS or not, and after 5 years they cut the study short because they saw that there was a between 60 and 65% reduction in the incidence of AIDS. As a result, they felt it was malpractice to continue the study, and they just started circumcising. And that was with adult males.
And how do you answer those in the, particularly the public arena, who talk about the great pain that circumcision causes a child?
There are different ways that the circumcision can be done. My surgery averages about 10 seconds. In that time, about 4 seconds, there's a pinch to the baby, which I use a spray to numb that. The baby never feels the cut. The baby never feels the instrument that I use to set it up.
And how would they say that you don't know that the baby feels?
Well, because the baby will respond. If you pinch a baby, he's going to cry. But if he's already crying and you pinch him, he's not going to suddenly go, wah, and cry or move in some way.
Yeah.
You would see that he would respond. I know, having done as many as I've done, that there is no response to the baby at that moment. He is crying more likely because he's on his back, undressed, held down, not nursing, sprayed with a spray, having his diaper changed. All of those will get a baby to cry. But I would say better than 97, 98% of the babies I do will be asleep in my arms or quietly drinking within 15 to 30 seconds after as soon as I pick him up.
Let me try to focus on I guess the parental conceptions, because I know there are a great many parents who have reservations, do it, don't do it, they vacillate. What's your strategy for reassuring parents, and more importantly, how do you explain to parents who may not be observant Jews but understand that circumcision is a basic part of Judaism, how do you explain to them the theology, why we circumcise our sons?
It depends on who's asking the question, because I might emphasize one argument as opposed to another. The amazing thing...
Who asks more often, the mothers or the fathers, you think?
The fathers will tell the mothers to ask all the questions, and they like to think that the mothers are doing worse, but God decided women should have babies because men couldn't handle it. So, you know, as to who's really nervous is another story. But the truth is, I've gone into homes where the father will come to the door and cut off jeans and a tank top holding a beer, and he's barefoot. And the amazing thing is they've called me to do the bris, that a bris is happening there. And in spite of what they would like to show in this anti-circumcision press, most Jews are circumcising. There are those who would be more swayed by the medical argument, and there are those who would be more swayed by the religious argument and the spiritual argument and the more mystical meditative argument. It depends on where the questions are coming from, and I try and determine that when they're asking me about it. Because bottom line is, most people are simply nervous that their child is going through this. Now, I have one granddaughter, 2 grandsons, and yes, I did do them. That's always the first question I get. But when I went with my granddaughter, she was about 3 months old, to have her ears pierced to the doctor, I will tell you that the scream that I heard, I never heard anything close to that in all the years I've been doing bris. Never heard it. So everything is relative. It's relatively benign to the child. It is certainly less than, and has no after effect most of the time, compared to, say, a vaccine. And we don't think twice about doing a vaccine.
Before we end, let me just ask you very quickly, what do you think as a faith community we can do to better communicate why we circumcise, and even though it may not be so politically correct right now, that it remains an essential part of our practice?
I think that what we are missing at the moment is a more spiritual angle to all of the things that we do. When you put it in a context and you communicate that through schools, through synagogues, through temples, then that educational level leads logically to doing a bris.
Very good.
Okay.
I want to thank you for being with us today and informing our entire audience. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition. Don't forget to visit our Facebook page for all the latest news about our program. I'm Lee Lazarson. Thanks for joining us on To Life, L'chaim.